Welcome to another deep dive, and this time, we're heading into the incredible world of animals.
It's gonna be wild, literally.
From, like, the deepest parts of the ocean where who knows what's lurking,
Oh yeah, there's a lot we still haven't discovered down there.
to some seriously smart creatures. Like, have you ever seen a crow use a tool? It's crazy.
And don't even get me started on octopuses. They're like alien intelligence right here on Earth.
But before we, get carried away, we should probably lay out where we're getting all this amazing info from.
Right, so we've got some awesome sources lined up for this deep dive, like National Geographic,
Classic.
BBC Earth, the Smithsonian, and of course, the World Wildlife Fund.
The heavy hitters. So basically, get ready to have your mind blown even if you think you're like an animal expert.
No matter how much you think you know, I guarantee you're gonna learn something new today.
Okay, so let's dive in. And I think a good place to start is, well, the ocean, right?
Always a good place to start. And speaking of starting, how about we start with something that's practically immortal?
Okay, you've got my attention. Immortal. Like, forever.
Pretty much. We're talking about the immortal jellyfish, Truitopsis dorni, this tiny little thing.
I'm already picturing, like, a giant glowing jellyfish.
No, this one's tiny, but it can basically rewind its own life cycle.
Rewind, wait, what?
Yeah, so like when it gets stressed or injured, instead of dying, its cells revert back to a younger state.
It's like Benjamin Button, the jellyfish edition.
Exactly. It transforms back into a polyp, which is its earliest life stage. It's basically like a butterfly turning back into a caterpillar.
That is mind-blowing. And, like, what are the implications of that? Can we learn from this?
Oh, absolutely. Scientists are going crazy for this little jellyfish, trying to figure out how it does what it does. I mean, think of the possibilities for human medicine, aging research.
It's like the fountain of youth in jellyfish form.
It really makes you wonder what else is out there, hidden in the vastness of the ocean.
Speaking of vastness, you mentioned something earlier about, was it a colossal squid?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. So picture this. It's bigger than a giant squid.
Okay, giant squid is already pretty huge.
And we know way less about it. It's like this mysterious monster lurking in the deep. But we do know it's got eyes the size of dinner plates.
Dinner plates, that's terrifying.
And tentacles with rotating hooks.
Rotating hooks. Like, what is this, a horror movie?
Mother Nature can be pretty scary sometimes. And get this, the biggest one we've ever found weighed over 1,000 pounds.
Whoa, heavier than a grand piano. I think I'll stick to, like, the cute little dolphins.
To each their own. But hey, since we're talking about the deep sea, have you ever wondered about all those creatures that light up?
Bioluminescence, right, yeah. I remember seeing it in Finding Nemo, but is it really that common?
Way more common than you think. Get this, 90% of deep sea creatures can produce their own light.
90%, seriously. Why, though? It's not like they're having a rave down there, are they?
Well, it's pitch black down there, so they need a way to, see and be seen.
Makes sense, but how does light help them survive?
It all depends. Like, take the anglerfish, for example. You know, the one with the little light dangling in front of its mouth?
Yeah, that's a creepy one.
Well, that light is how it lures in prey. It's like a built-in fishing rod.
Oh, wow, so it's a lure. That's actually pretty smart.
Right. And then you've got creatures like the vampire squid. They use bioluminescence as a defense mechanism. Like, they release a cloud of glowing particles to confuse predators.
So it's like a smoke screen. It's like they're little ninjas down there.
Exactly. And we think they might even use it to communicate, but that's still a bit of a mystery.
A whole language of light. That's wild. But, we've been talking about all this deep sea stuff, but I'm curious about land animals, too, especially when it comes to their intelligence.
Oh, we're just getting started with intelligence. The animal kingdom is full of brainiacs.
I mean, we all know dolphins are smart, but who else should we be impressed by?
How about elephants? They've got these incredible memories, and they exhibit behaviors that suggest they understand complex emotions.
I've seen those videos of them, like mourning their dead. It's heartbreaking, but is that really grief?
Researchers think so. They've seen elephants return to the bones of their family members, gently touch them. It's pretty amazing.
Wow, so they're not just big and strong, they're emotionally intelligent, too. But memory and emotions aside, what else makes them so smart?
Well, they can distinguish between different human languages.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, and they can even tell if a human is speaking in a friendly or threatening tone.
So they're basically eavesdropping on our conversations and figuring out who's a friend and who's a foe.
Pretty much, they've adapted to living alongside us and learned to read our cues.
It makes you wonder what they really think of us,
Makes you think. But hey, let's not forget about the birds, specifically the corvid family.
Corvids. You mean like crows and ravens? Those guys that are always getting into the trash?
Those are the ones, but they're way smarter than you might think. Some researchers even think they're as intelligent as primates.
Seriously? Crows as smart as monkeys? That's hard to believe.
I know, right? But get this, they're master tool users. Like, in Japan, crows have figured out how to use cars to crack walnuts.
They use cars. How does a crow even give it?
They drop the nuts on the crosswalk, wait for a car to run them over, and then when the light turns red, bam, cracked walnuts.
Whoa, that's next level thinking. They're using our technology against us. It's like a bird brain heist.
And they hold grudges, too. Like, they remember who's wronged them, even years later.
So they're smart, strategic, and they hold grudges. That's both impressive and a little scary.
You don't want to get on a crow's bad side, that's for sure. But we can't talk about animal intelligence without mentioning the octopus.
Octopuses. Okay, I'm ready for this. They're like the ultimate escape artists.
Right. Have you seen them squeeze through, like, tiny
Yeah,
holes?
it's like they're made of liquid or something.
That's because they're boneless. They can contort their bodies into any shape, and they're super smart, too.
So being boneless makes you a genius.
Not exactly, but it definitely helps with the escaping. And some species are masters of mimicry. They can change their skin color and texture to blend in, or even imitate other
Like a
creatures.
chameleon.
Exactly. They can blend into their surroundings, or even pretend to be something they're not to avoid predators.
It's like they're living in a spy movie, always one step ahead. But with all this intelligence, how do they learn? Do they teach each other?
That's a good question, and we're still trying to figure it out. Octopus mothers die shortly after laying their eggs, so there's no parental guidance.
So no octopus school.
Not that we know of, but they might learn through observation, watching, and imitating each other.
So it's like learn as you go, adapt or die.
Survival of the smartest, I guess you could say. But, we've been talking about, like, real animals, but what about those creatures that are more legendary?
Are we talking cryptids now? Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, all that.
The ones that blur the lines between reality and myth.
Okay, I'm down for this. So where do we start the Chupacabra?
Sure, let's start there. So picture this. A hairless, fanged beast that sucks the blood of livestock.
Okay, that's definitely creepy. Is there any proof that this thing exists?
Well, there have been lots of reports, especially in the Americas, but scientists think it might just be a coyote with mange.
Mange, like a skin disease. So not a vampire beast.
Probably not, but hey, it's still a good story, right?
Okay, that's one cryptid debunked. What about Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster? Surely there's got to be something swimming in that lake, right?
Nessie's a classic, with all those blurry photos and eyewitness accounts, but despite years of searching, we haven't found any solid evidence.
But what about that famous photo? The one with the long neck?
Turns out it was a hoax. It was actually a toy submarine with a fake head and neck attached.
No way. I always thought that was the real deal.
It's easy to get caught up in the mystery, but sometimes the truth is more mundane than we'd like to believe.
So no Nessie, no Chupacabra. What about Neckfoot? Or the Yeti? Surely there must be some giant ape-like creatures out there, right?
Well, there have been tons of sightings and footprints, but when they've analyzed the DNA, it usually turns out to be from bears or other known animals.
Really? So all this time, Bigfoot's just a really hairy bear?
The evidence suggests so, yeah. But hey, the mystery's part of the fun, right?
I guess so. Okay, so maybe those legendary creatures aren't real, but what about the definitely real and definitely dangerous predators out there?
Oh, there are plenty of those. Speaking of dangerous, have you ever heard of the box jellyfish?
Box jellyfish. Sounds kind of cute. What's so bad about that?
Don't let the name fool you. It's one of the deadliest creatures on Earth. It's got venom that can cause cardiac arrest in minutes.
Minutes. That's terrifying. What makes it so deadly?
Its tentacles are covered in these tiny stinging cells that inject venom, and it attacks the heart, nervous system, all the important stuff.
Yikes, that's a hard pass for me. I'm definitely staying away from those.
A wise decision. But hey, let's talk about something a little more punchy.
Punchy? Like what, a kangaroo?
Nope, even punchier. I'm talking about the mantis shrimp.
Mantis shrimp. Seriously. What's so special about a shrimp?
This little guy has the fastest punch in the animal kingdom. It can strike at 50 miles per hour.
50 miles per hour. That's like a car on a highway. How is that even possible for the shrimp?
They've got these club-like appendages that are spring-loaded, and when they strike, they create a cavitation bubble that intensifies the impact.
Cavitation ball.
It's like a tiny vapor-filled bubble that collapses with incredible force, creating a shock wave.
So they're basically packing a sonic boom in each punch. That's insane.
Insane, but effective. They can shatter aquarium glass with those punches.
Okay, I'm officially impressed and a little terrified. But let's move on to something maybe a little less violent,
Okay, how about something that's mastered the art of survival in the extreme cold?
like a polar bear.
Even smaller, think Arctic fox.
Arctic fox, huh? What's so special about them?
They can survive in temperatures as low as negative 58 degrees Fahrenheit.
Minus 58, that's colder than my freezer. How do they not freeze solid?
Well, for starters, they've got this thick coat of fur that changes color with the season. In winter, it's white for camouflage in the snow, and in summer, it turns brown to blend in with the tundra.
It's like a natural camo suit.
Right, and they've also got a compact body shape, short legs, and small ears, all to minimize heat loss. Plus, they can lower their metabolic rate to conserve energy when it's super cold.
Wow, they're like tiny, furry survival experts.
It just goes to show every creature out there, no matter how big or small, has some incredible adaptations to survive in its environment.
It's true, we've seen some pretty amazing stuff today, but it makes me wonder, with all these incredible creatures out there, are they all doing okay?
That's a big question, and one we'll definitely be digging into next time.
I'm ready for some good news, some conservation success stories, because honestly, all this talk about the threats facing animals is a little heavy.
Don't worry, we'll balance things out next time. Stay tuned.
Okay, so last time we were talking about all the threats facing animals, it kind of got a little, well, depressing.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff, but it's important to remember conservation works. There are some incredible success stories out there.
Okay, I need to hear about this. Give me some hope.
All right, how about this humpback whales? You know those majestic creatures with the haunting songs?
Oh yeah, they're incredible. I actually saw one breaching once. It was unforgettable.
They were hunted almost to extinction, but because of conservation efforts, their numbers have rebounded in recent decades.
Really, so they're like making a comeback.
Big time. It's proof that even when things look bleak, we can turn things around.
That's amazing to hear. Do you have any other, like, underdog stories?
Oh, absolutely. What about the gray wolf? Almost completely wiped out in the US, but thanks to reintroduction programs, they're back.
I remember hearing about that. It was, like, super controversial, right?
Oh, yeah, people were worried about them being dangerous, but it's actually been amazing for the ecosystem.
How so?
Well, when they reintroduced wolves to Yellowstone, it had a ripple effect through the whole park. Everything from elk populations to the rivers changed for the better.
So bringing back one species can actually help a whole ecosystem.
Exactly. And it's not just wolves, there's also the California condor.
The condor, that giant bird with, like, a 10-foot wingspan.
That's the one. Back in the 80s, there were only 22 left in the entire world.
22. Wow, that's, like, barely hanging on. How did they even come back from that?
It took a lot of work, captive breeding programs, habitat restoration, but it worked. Now there are over 500 of them.
It's incredible what we can do when we put our minds to it and our resources. But, we keep talking about saving individual species, but shouldn't we be looking at the bigger picture?
You're hitting on something really important here, and that's the concept of biodiversity.
Biodiversity. Yeah, I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully get it.
It's basically the variety of life on Earth, from the tiniest bacteria to, the blue whale, everything.
So it's about having lots of different species.
More than that, it's about the richness and complexity of life, all the different ecosystems and the interactions between species.
And why is that so important?
Well, think of it like this. A diverse ecosystem is a healthy ecosystem. It's more resilient to change and more productive, and ultimately, it benefits us too.
So, like, a rainforest is more biodiverse than, say, a cornfield.
Exactly. And that biodiversity provides us with clean air, clean water, food, medicines, so many things.
It sounds like protecting biodiversity is about more than just saving cute animals. It's about saving ourselves, too.
Right. It's about protecting the systems that support all life on Earth.
But that sounds like a huge task. Like, where do we even start?
It does seem overwhelming, but it starts with understanding how interconnected everything is. We can't just focus on single species. We need to protect entire ecosystems.
So it's about, like, protecting habitats, not just individual animals.
Exactly. And that means reducing our impact on the environment, restoring degraded habitats, and addressing things like climate change.
Okay, so big picture stuff. But what can, like, regular people do? It all feels so big and out of our control.
We can all make choices that make a difference, like reducing our carbon footprint, driving less, choosing sustainable products. All of that helps.
I've been trying to eat less meat. That's supposed to be good for the environment, right?
Definitely. And we can also support conservation organizations or even just get out there and appreciate nature, connect with it.
I like that, appreciating nature. It's easy to forget how important it is when you're stuck in the city.
I know what you mean, but even in the city, there are parks, gardens. You can even just look up at the birds.
Just taking a moment to appreciate it all. Okay, I can do that. So we've talked about the deep sea, animal intelligence, conservation. What other wonders of the animal kingdom do we have left to explore?
Well, how about communication? Animals talk to each other in all sorts of amazing ways.
Communication. I mean, I know dogs bark and cats meow, but what about other animals? How do they communicate without words?
They use a whole range of signals, sounds, visual cues, scents, even electrical impulses.
Electrical impulses. That's wild. Like what, they're sending Morse code through the water?
Not exactly Morse code, but some fish can generate electric fields to communicate in murky water. But let's start with the basics of vocalizations.
Like bird songs.
Bird songs, wolf howls, monkey chatter, all of that. They use sounds to convey information about their location, their intentions, even their emotions.
It's like their own language, and we're just starting to understand it.
Exactly, but it's not just sound. Visual cues are huge too.
Like what, a dog wagging its tail?
That's a good one. Or think about a peacock's tail feathers. Those are all about attracting a mate.
So it's like, look at me, I'm fabulous.
Pretty much. And even subtle things like a raised eyebrow or a flick of the tail can convey a whole lot of information.
It's amazing how much they can communicate without saying a word. But what about scents? How do those play a role?
Scents are super important, especially for mammals. Think about dogs marking their territory, or cats rubbing their cheeks on things.
It's all about leaving their mark, their scent signature.
Exactly, they're leaving behind chemical messages that other animals can detect.
So they've got like super-powered noses.
They do have a highly developed sense of smell, way more sensitive than ours. They can pick up on tiny traces of scents that we wouldn't even notice.
It's like a whole world of smells that we're completely oblivious to.
And it's how they navigate their world, find food, attract mates, avoid predators. It's fascinating stuff.
This is blowing my mind. So with all these different ways of communicating, how do scientists even figure out what they're saying?
It's a tough job, but they use all sorts of methods, like observing behavior, doing experiments, even playing back recorded sounds to see how animals react.
It's like they're trying to crack the code of animal language.
In a way, yeah, and it's helping us to understand the complexity of their social lives and the ways they interact with their environment.
So it's not just about individual animals anymore, it's about understanding them as part of a larger web of relationships.
Exactly. And those relationships can be pretty surprising sometimes. Like, have you ever heard of symbiosis?
Symbiosis. It sounds familiar, but refresh my memory.
It's basically when two different species live together and benefit from each other.
Oh, like the clownfish and the anemone.
That's a classic example. The clownfish gets protection from the anemone's stinging tentacles, and the anemone gets cleaned by the clownfish.
So they both get something out of it. That's pretty cool.
Right, it's a win-win situation. And there are tons of examples out there, like the oxpecker bird and the rhinoceros.
The oxpecker, that little bird that hangs out on rhinos.
That's the one. It eats the ticks and parasites off the rhino's skin, and the rhino gets a free cleaning service.
It's like a little rhino spa treatment.
Exactly. But of course, not all relationships are so mutually beneficial.
You're talking about parasites, like the things that give you the creeps.
Parasites are a part of life too, unfortunately. They benefit at the expense of their host, like fleas, ticks, tapeworms, all sorts of nasty things.
Yikes, it's a good thing we have those pest control commercials, right? But seriously, it's amazing how diverse these relationships are, even the icky ones.
It's all part of the balance of nature. Everything's connected in some way.
So with all these connections and all these challenges, what's the future looking like for the animal kingdom? I mean, is there hope?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the answer is, it's complicated, but there's definitely hope.
Okay, complicated hope. I can work with that.
We're facing some serious issues like climate change, habitat loss, pollution, but there's a growing awareness of these problems, and more people are working to find solutions.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Definitely not. There are so many dedicated individuals, organizations, even governments working to protect animals and their habitats.
That's good to hear, but what can, like, the average person do? It all seems so overwhelming.
We can all make a difference. Reduce our carbon footprint, choose sustainable products, support conservation groups, even just educate ourselves and others about the importance of biodiversity.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about doing what we can wherever we are.
Exactly. Every little bit counts. And together, we can make a real difference.
Okay, I like that. We can do this. But before we get too deep into the solutions, I have one last question.
Shoot.
With everything we've talked about, what's the one thing that really stands out to you? What's the most important lesson you've learned from all this?
It's got to be the incredible interconnectedness of everything. Every species, every ecosystem, it's all connected in ways we're only just beginning to understand.
So it's not just about saving individual animals, it's about protecting the whole system.
Exactly. And that's why biodiversity is so crucial. The healthier and more diverse our ecosystems are, the healthier our planet will be for all of us.
Okay, I'm getting philosophical now, but seriously, that's a powerful message. It's not just about them, it's about us too.
We're all in this together, for better or worse.
Well said. I think it's time for a break, but when we come back, we'll dive into even more amazing animal facts and mind-blowing adaptations.
Stick around, there's so much more to discover.
Wow, we've gone from the deepest oceans to the frozen Arctic, from tiny little creatures to massive whales. It's incredible to think about how much life is out there.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to discover, so many species we haven't even found yet.
It's mind-blowing and humbling at the same time. But speaking of discovering new things, what about those creatures that are just plain weird?
The outliers, the ones that don't fit neatly into any category.
Yeah, those. The ones that make you go, wait, that's a real animal.
Oh, there are plenty of those. Like, where do you even start?
Well, how about the platypus? I mean, it lays eggs. It's got a duckbill, venomous spurs. It's like a mashup of different animals.
The platypus is a classic. It's one of the few mammals that lays eggs. They're called monotremes.
Mammals that lay eggs. That's just bizarre. But what about the duckbill and the venom? What's the deal with that?
Well, that duckbill isn't actually a bill. It's covered in electroreceptors, so they can sense the electrical signals of their prey in the water.
So it's like a sixth sense for finding food.
Exactly. And those venomous spurs are mostly on the males, probably for defense or competition during mating season.
So they're not just weird, they're kind of dangerous, too. I'm seeing the platypus in a whole new light now.
Nature is full of surprises, but if you think the platypus is weird, wait till you hear about the flying gecko.
Hold on, flying gecko. Geckos can fly.
Well, not fly exactly, more like glide. They've got flaps of skin along their sides and between their toes, and they can spread them out like a parachute.
A gecko parachute. I've got to see this.
You can actually find videos online. It's pretty amazing. They can glide for like 6 meters from tree to tree.
6 meters. That's like the length of my living room. It's like something out of a superhero movie. A gecko with a gape.
Evolution's pretty creative, that's for sure.
It really is. But, with all these incredible adaptations and all this diversity, are there any, like, common threads that connect all these creatures?
That's a good question. At the end of the day, it all comes down to survival and reproduction, passing on your genes.
So it's all about, like, stay alive long enough to have babies and keep the species going.
Basically, yeah, and that means adapting to your environment, finding food, avoiding predators, all that.
It's a tough world out there.
It is, but it's also incredibly beautiful and complex, and there's still so much we don't know.
That's what I love about this. The more we learn, the more we realize how much there is left to discover.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to protect the natural world, so future generations can keep exploring and learning.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the, like, take-home message for our listeners? What can we do to help ensure there are still amazing animals around for years to come?
I think the biggest thing is awareness. The more we understand about the challenges facing animals, the more likely we are to care and to act.
So educate ourselves, learn about the issues.
Exactly. And then make choices that support conservation, whether that's reducing our own impact, supporting organizations, or advocating for change.
It all makes a difference, even the small things.
Every little bit helps. Remember, we're all connected. What we do impacts the planet and the creatures that share it with us.
I think that's a good note to end on, interconnectedness. We've journeyed from the deepest oceans to the highest mountains. We've met some seriously strange and wonderful creatures.
We've talked about intelligence and communication and survival and the importance of protecting this amazing planet of ours.
It's been a wild ride, and I hope our listeners have learned something new and maybe even feel inspired to get out there and explore or learn more or just take a moment to appreciate the incredible diversity of life that surrounds us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep wondering.